If your camera is overheating and you don't know what to do, this episode's for you.
3, 2, 1.
Here we go!
Hi and welcome back to DIY Film with Merle Becker, the channel where I help you make better videos. As usual, I've got a bonus tip for you at the end of this video, so keep it locked. All right, let's talk hot cameras. And by hot cameras, I don't mean the best-selling ones. Fact is, summer is here and we're all outside shooting video on our mirrorless cameras. Or maybe you're in your studio and you've got that air conditioning turned off so that your audio will be clean. And in both scenarios, it's hot as Hades. And suddenly you see that little blinking overheat symbol on the back of your camera. Gah, it's hot camera summer and you don't know what to do. This scenario, my friends, is not foreign to me. Camera overheating is a problem that I encounter on a somewhat regular basis. I shoot all of my videos on my Canon R6 in my studio, and my studio is on the third floor of an older home that doesn't have central air. And in the summer, I always have to turn off my portable air conditioner when I'm shooting so that I have clean audio. And with no air conditioning, that room is pretty much like a hot attic in the dead of summer. As a result, I have to stop my filming periodically because I often get that overheat symbol. And believe it or not, overheating is not a new issue with mirrorless cameras like my R6. It's been an issue since some of the older DSLRs came out, like the Canon 7D. So yeah, overheating, it's not a new thing. And when it happens, all you can really do is turn off the camera, stick it on a towel-wrapped ice pack for a bit, and pick up from where you left off once it's cooled down. Which begs the question, why do cameras overheat? Well, as we all know, just about every computer processor gets hot when it's in use, especially if it's being used for a long period of time. And cameras are no exception. But in your desktop or your laptop computers, there's a little fan in there to dissipate some of that heat. And in a DSLR or mirrorless camera, not so much. The truth is, most manufacturers have designed their cameras for still photography. And with a few exceptions, they don't include a fan in there to dissipate the heat generated by video processing. Perhaps it's to keep their cameras small, or maybe it's to keep them quiet, or maybe both. Sometimes, however, companies like Canon will provide an overheat control function. And that overheat control function will automatically change your movie size and frame rate to smaller ones during standby to reduce the amount of work the camera is doing. But this solution is not as effective as some would like. Another way filmmakers avoid overheating is by shooting shorter clips. This is so their camera isn't working so hard for long periods of time. But again, this isn't always an option for those of us who prefer one continuous take, or if you're shooting a longer scene. And yet another way videographers have found a way around overheating is to record to something other than the camera's internal memory card. This means recording to something like an Atomos, which is basically an external monitor/video recorder. You can hook up your camera to the Atomos with an HDMI cable and send the video signal and the audio separately if you choose to the unit, where it does all the work of recording both far away from your camera body, which is nice. But some of us may have budgetary constraints, or you may need an immediate solution, and you don't really want to add another component to your video recording setup right now. So finding other, more immediate ways to mitigate camera overheating is crucial, which is why I thought I'd share my top 4 things you can do today without buying anything new or changing your script to prevent your camera from overheating. Number 1, ventilate the camera body. Since the camera body is the part of the camera that heats up, it makes sense to try and keep it cool by not only keeping it out of a warm environment while you shoot, but also airing it out. Let's start with the obvious ones. First, don't keep your camera in direct sunlight when possible. Move other equipment or objects away from your camera when possible. And if you can, stick your camera on a tripod instead of holding it in your hands. Not only do your hands give off a bunch of heat, but when they're wrapped around a camera, they're also preventing the camera body from dissipating some of its heat. Another way to keep the camera body cool is to shoot with the LCD screen positioned away from the unit so that some of the camera body's heat can escape more easily. And yet another way you can let that heat escape is perhaps a little more unconventional, but it's done nonetheless. It's to shoot with the battery door open. When that battery door is open, it provides yet another escape route for hot air. Now, this isn't possible with all models of cameras, but I do know that some of the Sonys can do this. Or while we're on the subject of batteries, since the batteries are one of the things that really heat up during operation, you could also swap out your batteries between clips. Sticking a cool battery in there between takes can also buy you a little time before you overheat. And yet another way to keep the camera body a little more ventilated is to use an AC adapter instead of the batteries. Using an AC adapter will take that hot battery out of your camera altogether and buy you a little more time before you overheat. So see if you can do some of these minor physical adjustments before your next hot shoot. It could mean the difference between shooting for an hour or waiting for an hour. Number 2, turn off some of the additional features. Every fancy function you use on your camera makes it work harder, and when your camera is working harder, it generates more heat. So, for example, functions like autofocus, or shooting in 8K instead of a lower resolution, or shooting at a higher frame rate like 120 frames per second. All of these make the camera work harder. Or even using the LCD screen, which really isn't that fancy. Turning it off can be a big help. That LCD screen is just one more thing that the camera has to power up and maintain during your shoot. So turn off that LCD screen if you can do without it. Or set your focus manually and you can turn off the autofocus, or shoot in 60 frames per second instead of 120 if you can, because less work means a cooler camera, and that means longer shooting time. Number 3, turn off your camera between takes. This is a big one, and by turning it off, I don't mean just letting it sit and stand by. I mean actually turning it off. And if you can, keep a little fan nearby to blow some air on your camera while it's off. Or better yet, turn on the air conditioning and put the camera near it between takes. Any opportunity you have to give your camera a rest, say while your talent is in wardrobe or something, will help you big time. I also sometimes have an ice pack wrapped in a towel nearby to really get the temperature down while it's off. So get in the habit of turning off your camera between takes, even if it's just for a few minutes. It can buy you some more time before it overheats. Number 4, check for firmware updates. This last one is a good idea not only to help with overheating issues, but also to address any other little bugs your camera might have. All digital cameras run on firmware, which is basically the software they use to operate. And just like updates to your computer's operating software, camera manufacturers released improved firmware for their products too. And when they do, they put a link to the latest firmware release on their website for you to download. So, for example, with the Canon R6, after it came out, Canon offered a firmware update which addressed some of the overheating issues. The difference wasn't huge, but in the end it did give users a little more time before the unit overheated. So if you know you're going to be shooting in the heat, check your camera manufacturer's website to see if there's a firmware update available. Download it, install it, test it out, and hopefully it helps you beat the heat a little bit. All right, friends, those are your 4 hot tips. To review, 4 things you can do today to help prevent your camera from overheating are: ventilate the camera body, turn off some of the additional features, turn off your camera between takes, and check for firmware updates. Alrighty, let's do the tip. This may seem like an obvious one, but in case you didn't think of it, here you go. If your camera is prone to overheating and your shoot is going to be inside, schedule it for the evening. Because as you know, you've got to turn off that air conditioning when you shoot so you have clean audio. And if you're shooting without that air conditioner, it's going to be cooler in that room in the evening. The sun is down and everything is cooler. So if you can, rethink your shoot schedule and make it a nighttime shoot. You may need a little more coffee, but you'll have a cooler camera. Alrighty folks, stay cool. As always, if you found any of this helpful, please give the video a thumbs up, subscribe and hit the bell so you know when the next one is posted, and I will catch you next time.